So I'd like to welcome our guest, Neil Oberman, to the Federation CJA 360 podcast. Neil, it's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
So
That's
Neil,
a snippet from a CJN Daily podcast from June. And the voices you heard belong to Glenn Nashin with Federation CJA in Montreal and lawyer Neil Oberman. And they were chatting about how Oberman's been using the courts in Quebec to try to protect the Jewish community after October 7th. A CJN Daily listener in Saskatoon heard this episode, and it moved her to take action too. She'd been upset about a local Two-Spirit LGBTQ artists pop-up market called Cheers for Queers. They were advertising an event on social media, and their post showed pro-Palestine graphics and words. Our listener and some other Jewish women in the city felt this pop-up art market was excluding pro-Israel vendors and customers, despite the artist's stance advocating for inclusion for marginalized people, including Palestinians and Jews, just not Zionists or people who support Israel. The hall where they'd rented space to hold this market is operated by a non-profit agency called Saskatoon Open Doors. It helps newcomers and refugees, and it gets most of its funding from government. After much discussion with the agency, including some heated exchanges amongst the agency's own staff, the artists still refused to allow any Zionists in, although it isn't clear how they could tell and what they would do. At any rate, the rental contract was canceled. The artists felt the space wouldn't be safe for them. They got their money refunded and scrambled to find a new place to host the market. An Indigenous youth center took them in. But right before the doors were to open on June 29th, nature or God or some other karma intervened.
I mean, it's really awful that their space flooded, but there's something to be said about an event being postponed because of heavy rains.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Thursday, July the 11th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit.
I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at the cjn.ca/NTKR or wherever you get your podcasts.
Since October 7th, anti-Semitism has spiked across Canada, and Jews living in the major cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver have borne the brunt of the violence. And even small communities, including Fredericton, have not been immune. But so far, Saskatoon's Jewish community hasn't experienced any hate crimes, although there have been swastikas sprayed on bridges and protests, and the University of Saskatchewan Faculty Association did support a motion recently to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. So how are Jews in this prairie city navigating post-October 7th, with about 200 families, 3 shuls, and a Jewish community center? On today's show, we're joined by 2 members of a new grassroots group, the founder, who has asked that her name not be used for security reasons, and Hannah Jodry, a community educator who's very involved with her synagogue. She's taught Hebrew school, and she got involved after an incident at her daughter's high school. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Thanks for having us.
Hi.
We're speaking because you approached us at the CJN to let us know about a disturbing, concerning event that was happening in your city. And I mean disturbing for the Jewish community. Give us the background on it.
About a month ago, just over a month ago, somebody mentioned to me that there was going to be this market that's happening in Saskatoon where no Zionists are allowed. And immediately I, like anybody else that's Jewish and is an ally, was outraged and didn't quite know what to do, and left it inside and kept the outrage going. And then the next day I actually listened to a podcast on the CJN randomly, where with Neil Oberman, and he was talking about how inaction leads to no good outcome, and something just clicked, and it was the thing that lit the fire inside of me that I had to say, I need to do something. I can't just sit back. So then I started to do some research and I started talking to some people. And the more I found out, I realized that it was held at a nonprofit organization here in town that is supposed to be inclusive to all. And I read their mission and value statement. And I thought, no, this isn't right. They can't be hosting a market where they explicitly state no Zionists, aka Jews, although they will deny that aloud. So I called B'nai B'rith, I called the MLA, I called the MP. I just started calling around to see what I should do. And after a week or so of people telling me, oh, this is horrible, I'm sorry, nothing really came of it. And I just thought it's time for me to do something else instead of telling people. And I decided to put myself out there and write a letter to the CEO of the nonprofit organization that was hosting this event to let him know that actually just to make you aware, there's an event that's happening in your space that goes completely against all the values of what you are telling people that you do. Surprisingly, he wrote me back the next day and let me know that first of all, he apologized. And then he let me know that this is not right and that they are taking steps and they're speaking to the events of this maker market, to which I was honestly shocked. I did not expect anything. They spoke to the organizers and the organizers refused to change their marketing and their advertising. Anything on their social media or their Facebook page or just anything that had to do with their event. And so they told them that they cannot have the event in their space. And so they actually ended up leaving and moving the event somewhere else.
Was that how you decided to be smart about how you're going to fight this, is use their own, as you said, the taxpayers' money argument?
Absolutely. That was going to be my next step if we didn't get anywhere. But the CEO was honestly just wonderful and agreed and said this does not go with our policies. And they moved the market. So now it's going to be held at another space, an Indigenous space called the White Buffalo Youth Lodge, I believe. You know, the kinship market was upset, obviously, and they sent out an open letter to the community, just talking about how, it's an oppressive, Zionism is oppressive, and you can find out all the information. It's not really important what they said, but now we're working towards, taking steps to make sure that events like these do not have a place in our society. Events like these that actually actively exclude a group of people, it's specifically like calling them out and trying to bully us. It's honestly just not right.
And it was intended to be part of Pride celebrations. And so that was kind of the framing around it. But I mean, it was canceled because the building was not able to be used. And the building where they moved then flooded. So they will be having.
Say that what they flooded? It flooded, so they couldn't have it at all.
And they postponed it now until August. So it was supposed to be at the end of June as part of Pride, but had to move because we've been getting a lot of rain. So
right, but that's kind of ironic too, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to wish people terrible things,
and it's not about their space either. Like the White Buffalo Youth Lodge does a lot of really wonderful things, and we're not trying to take away from that.
Is this the only thing that you've had to deal with in the city since October 7th?
No, we've come together in the past, I guess, through the past few weeks. A group of us have kind of been talking for quite a while now about, trying to take some action and trying to take concrete steps to see what we can actually do. Because up until now, we've kind of been like working on our own, doing kind of some individual things, not really talking too much to each other. So we've come together, and what we've noticed as well is that, like, a lot of us we're parents, right? So our children are in school, in the public school system in Saskatoon. We don't have any Jewish schools, so what we've noticed from talking to each other and sharing our experiences and the experiences of our children is that our children are actually facing a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of different events or different treatment kind of thing. For example, my daughter has had a few incidents. She's in grade 11 in a local high school in Saskatoon. And, last month, she walked into her English class and 2 kids in the classroom were drawing this massive, like the Happy Merchant meme that with the Jewish, the caricature of the stereotypical Jew with the hunched shoulders and the long nose, rubbing the hands kind of thing, calling out to other children or other kids in the classroom, hey, look, it's those people that you hate. The drawing stayed on the board for the entire class. So we had a meeting with the school administration about this, and I explained, what it was and why it's problematic, and also we talked a bit about what are some of these images, because that example is very blatant, right? Like it doesn't take a lot of background knowledge to know, hey, this is anti-Semitic, this is wrong, you probably shouldn't be doing this. But there are some other symbols and other messaging that perhaps the school administration was not aware about. And especially in relation to October 7th, post October 7th. So, for example, like watermelon emojis even, right? So we had a conversation about that. And the impression that I got from that was while the school admin was really wanting to be on board and wanted to help and could recognize immediately that, no, this is wrong. At the same time, they didn't have a lot of that background knowledge. Like I said, we don't have Jewish schools here. We don't have a large Jewish population. A lot of people in Saskatoon don't really know Jewish people, right? So they don't really understand what anti-Semitism is or what it looks like always. And now in its current iteration of anti-Zionism, right, anti-Israel sentiment and rhetoric and propaganda, they don't necessarily recognize it for what it is. So I'm noticing there's a bit of a gap there. It's not that they don't want to help. They do. They do want to help. They do want to be on board, but they don't necessarily know how.
Is she the only Jewish person in her class?
Yes, in that class, yes, she was.
Was there any discipline, any follow-up, any consequences?
Yeah, after I brought it to the attention of the teacher, it was a sub that day, and to their credit, I have to say, it was on the back of the board. It wasn't right in the front of the class. They had the lights off. They were watching a movie that day. It's possible the sub didn't notice it. My daughter did draw his attention to it after the class was finished and everyone else had left. So she didn't want to talk about this in front of other people. And the sub, was like, oh my God, like that's not cool. Erased it, left a note for the teacher to be aware of what happened. But at that point, like I had already been on the phone with the admin and with the principal just to let them know, hey, this is up, and we should probably have a meeting about this to discuss it. So we did arrange that. The students did face. I do believe they were suspended for a couple of days, but I'm not sure how much of a learning opportunity may have been missed as a result of this. Like as an educator myself, I'm kind of, always searching where are these teachable moments, because they kind of appear where you might not expect them. And I think that this could have been possibly one of those moments. But again, like I said, a lot of people don't necessarily have the background or the training or the knowledge to be able to tackle that kind of thing. Like it just one teacher kind of thing in a classroom of students like that. So.
It's disturbing because I know that in Saskatoon, every year they have a large Holocaust education program for non-Jewish students, Jewish students at like a community. Like it's big. It's like 2,000-3,000 people go, right? And did Saskatoon adopt mandatory Holocaust education?
Yeah, the government of Saskatchewan has adopted that, and I think they're planning on implementing that in the 2025-26 school year.
Thanks, Hannah. What else are you seeing besides the maker market in your family? What's happening?
It's just, honestly, it's not even my kids. My kids are still pretty little, so I haven't necessarily seen much, fortunately. In their schools, they're protected, they're fine for now, as far as we know. Little things come up here and there, but yeah, I feel like we're not special in the sense that this is happening in our small city. it's happening across the country, and it's happening. I've got friends across the country, and it's happening honestly everywhere. Every day I'm hearing something from a friend of mine. It's just a lot. And as a parent, it makes me worried. It makes me worried for our children. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to take a stand. I wanted to show them that this is possible. And I wanted to show other people. And that's why I thought it was important to talk about. I think that really, honestly, anybody can stand up and do something, and don't let them bully you, because every day at the same time, while all this stuff is going on, I'm still finding that there are a lot more allies out there than we think we have. A lot more. And just because they're not as vocal as we are, I know that they really do appreciate that we are standing up for their Canadian values. And this is just by talking to people. They don't see this as Canadian.
I just wanted to mention as well that what we're seeing, I think, across Canada and a lot of the larger centers, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, we haven't really seen as much of that to that level in Saskatoon. And I mean, I've always considered myself leaning towards the left in terms of like political alignment and that kind of thing. October 8th, I was like, what the heck? Am I like suddenly like a Fox News watching Republican conservative kind of thing? Like what happened? All of these institutions that I had, felt a part of, all of these causes that I've worked with before. Like I mentioned, I'm an educator. I've worked in anti-racist education initiatives for well over 10 years. I've worked building bridges with Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders in my community. All of this is gone. How did this happen? How did this shift occur? And so there's been a lot of, I feel like now I'm kind of like, I've got it. Like, okay, I understand. I can see it for what it is. But that was just months and months of feeling completely shocked, and like I was just reeling, like I didn't know how to deal with that. So yeah. I think one thing in Saskatoon, to circle back to my original point here, is that Saskatchewan in general tends to skew a little bit more conservative than the rest of the country, maybe with the exception of like Alberta. But I think in a way that has actually kind of been a bit of a buffer, honestly. So we haven't seen these same types of protests to the same level. Also, we have a smaller population, so I think that's why as well. But like she mentioned, we do have support, but I think people tend to be maybe a little bit quiet about it.
I remember early in the fall, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a disruption at the legislature with people who were protesting for Palestine, anti-Israel protesters, and they were kicked out of the legislature?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep. I actually I have a connection with the leader of that group. In fact, he used to be a former student of mine, so I know him quite well. We've had several conversations.
Do you deal with each other now?
We don't really speak anymore. I mean, we did go out for coffee a few times after October 7th just to talk about things and everything. But I feel, I don't know. I'm not sure where he's at right now, and honestly, don't really want to pursue that. So,
in Toronto and in some of the larger communities, but specifically, I know in Toronto, since October 7th, there's been a more kind of grassroots muscular Judaism that has sprung up from younger people because they see people protesting in the streets against Jews, and they say it's time for us to get our sleeves rolled up and not wait for the established Jewish community to be doing it their way. So they've had a lot of success bringing great speakers in, like I don't know if you heard of Douglas Murray, for example, who is the ally, the British journalist, and they're doing interfaith work, and they're getting onto the streets and having rallies for the hostages. So I wonder where you see yourselves fitting in. Is it something similar to that, would you say, that new leadership, new strategies, new approaches, you feel that that's needed now?
Absolutely. I was just going to say, definitely seeing ourselves as grassroots. We are getting some support from CJA lately, like just very recently in the last week. They didn't even know about what was going on here because they're not here. They're not actually in our city. Federation's not in our city. So we have to let them know. And if it's not us, then I'm not sure who else is going to do it. So we really, I just think, the catalyst for all of this was this makers market, but we're not stopping now, and we're just going to keep going.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, one thing to note with our developing grassroots advocacy and organizing, none of us, we belong to all different communities, all the different Jewish communities within the city, and some of us are unaffiliated completely. So it's not specifically connected to one synagogue or one community organization or anything like that. We're spread out and represent all of them or none of them.
How many are there of you?
I think there's about 15 or 20 maybe people with varying levels of participation at the moment.
And lastly, what pushback have you received, if any, from any parts of the community for what you've done?
Well, I mean, with the kinship market, they were pretty upset, I think, about that. They posted this open letter on their social media and their Instagram and Facebook and stuff, kind of trashing Open Door a little bit and saying what they had that they were really disappointed. They garnered some sympathy among their followers for that kind of thing. That's what we see happen anytime anybody stands up for Jews these days. But in terms of like on a personal level, I haven't. There's online, but I don't really consider that like real life. Nothing to my face, nothing that has actually made me feel physically unsafe.
And just to add to that, from my perspective, I've received a lot of people that are just like amazed that this was possible to happen. I think that we got a win, this is our win. So I've gotten a lot of support for what we've done, what we've been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time. I've actually had people reach out to me privately asking me for advice on this. And so now I feel like I'm a real activist, but I just really, my hope is that anybody that's listening truly takes it upon themselves to know that you can do something about it. You can really help to combat anti-Semitism on your own and within your community. I bet that if you feel alone, there's probably at least 10 other people who feel alone, and just gather them and do something together.
And what about pushback from within the Jewish community, Annie?
I had a lot of people tell me that they didn't think anything would happen. I had a lot of people saying that they were like, oh, this is not going to work. Good on you for trying, but it works. So you never know. And, maybe the next one won't be as successful, but it doesn't matter because, inaction leads to no good outcome. And I think we just have to keep pushing forward and truly keep trying.
So the bottom line is, though, they are still scheduled for August, whatever the date is, right?
I think one thing that we have to keep working on doing is making connections with other people who might be allies, right? Other non-Jewish community members, other organizations within the community, churches, perhaps Indigenous organizations too, especially considering this kinship market will be held in an Indigenous space.
We're going to do whatever we can. There's lots of different things we can do, and hopefully we're going to get some more support from organizations like CJA who will be able to come out and help us.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. For his part, the president of the city's Agudas Israel congregation, Kevin Scharf, tells me that what the grassroots group is doing is great because the goal for everyone is to counter anti-Semitism. However, Scharf said he's committed to the police not to hold counter-protests or even to hold protests that provoke more anti-Jewish hate. Instead, he and his rabbi and others have been dialoguing regularly with the city's many faith groups, with politicians, the police, Indigenous leaders, and public school officials, and on campus too, and will continue to do so, including on this art market controversy. The Daily is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. If you'd like to listen to the podcast episode that inspired our guests, subscribe to the CJN Daily on your phone or tablet. Check the link in our show notes for how to do it. Thanks for listening.
Y'all remember that joke from Airplane? The old lady asked for some light reading.
How about this leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends?
But in actuality, that's changing. Jews are crushing it in sports around the world, and we are here to celebrate them.
Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout.
Zach Hyman, his first career hat trick. 41 points for Diddy Avdia. It's Sue Bird's building.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jamie.
We love Jews and we love sports, but most of all, we love kvelling over Jews in sports.
Together we host Menschwarmers, the longest running Jewish sports podcast in the world. Listen and subscribe at thecjn.ca and wherever you find your podcasts.